My name is Audrey, and I am 17 years old. I used to think I had a normal life in our quiet suburban neighborhood. Good grades, one best friend, strict parents, nothing special, nothing extreme. Until the day everything I thought I knew about family shattered. My own father locked me in our basement for 3 days without food. My own mother told everyone I was just out with friends. 3 days in the dark, starving and terrified, all because I dared to dream of a future they did not choose. If you are watching this from somewhere safe right now, please hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you are. My story might be hard to hear, but I promise there is a reason I need to share what happened next. Before everything fell apart, my life looked pretty average from the outside. I lived in a 2-story house with a well-maintained lawn, in a neighborhood where people smiled and waved, but mostly kept to themselves. My father, Richard, worked as a manufacturing supervisor at a factory about 30 minutes from our home. He had served in the military for 12 years before I was born, and that military precision never really left him. Everything in our house had a place, and everything needed to be in its place. My bedroom was subject to random inspections. My homework was checked not just for completion, but for neatness. Dinner was always at 6 o'clock sharp, and being late was never an option. My mother, Linda, worked part-time at the local library. She was quieter, softer in her approach, but no less committed to maintaining what my father called order in the ranks. When he would explode over small infractions, like a glass left on the counter or shoes not perfectly aligned in the entryway, she would give me a look that said, "Just do what he wants." She never contradicted him, never stood up for me, when his punishment seemed excessive. Her way of showing love was to quietly slip into my room afterward with a snack or to offer to help with my homework. It was her way of apologizing without having to admit anything was wrong. The rules in our house were endless. No social media. Phone had to be surrendered at 9 p.m. each night. Friends had to be pre-approved, which meant Jasmine was my only real friend. We had known each other since elementary school, and her parents were the kind my parents approved of, church-going conservative, strict with their own daughter. What my parents did not know was that Jasmine and her family provided me with a window into what normal family life could look like. They had rules too, but there was laughter in their house. Disagreements happened without screaming. Mistakes were treated as learning opportunities, not moral failings. School became my sanctuary. I maintained a 4.0 GPA not just because of my parents' expectations, but because academic success seemed like my only ticket to eventual freedom. I joined every club I could that would not require evening activities my parents would forbid. Debate team during lunch hour, science club during study hall, and eventually the school newspaper. Photography started as a hobby when I was 14. My grandfather had left behind an old Nikon camera when he passed away, and my mother had kept it. On a rare day when my father was in a generous mood, he allowed me to have it, though he called it an impractical distraction. That camera became my secret joy. I took it everywhere school allowed, documenting everything from the changing seasons to the subtle expressions on people's faces when they thought no one was watching. When I joined the school newspaper in sophomore year, my photography found purpose. Suddenly, my images were telling stories, capturing moments that mattered to our small school community. The basketball team's victory, the drama club's standing ovation, the protests some seniors organized when the school board tried to cut arts funding. For the first time, I felt like I was contributing to something bigger than myself. My parents had reluctantly allowed me to join the newspaper because it looked good on college applications, but they had no idea how it was changing me, Mrs. Winters, our faculty advisor, was the first adult who ever asked what I thought about important issues. She encouraged us to look beyond the surface, to question, to investigate. A good journalist, she would say, is not satisfied with the first answer. Dig deeper. Ask why. Follow the evidence wherever it leads. Those words lit something inside me that I had never felt before. At home, questioning was defiance. At the newspaper, it was our mission. Junior year, I was promoted to photography editor. It was a small position on a small paper, but to me it felt enormous. Mrs. Winters started giving me more challenging assignments. Capture what it feels like to be 17 in America today, she said once. Another time, show me what hope looks like in our town. These assignments pushed me to look at my community differently, to see both its beauty and its brokenness. As my perspective widened, the suffocating narrowness of my home life became harder to bear. Small acts of rebellion started to slip out. I questioned why we never discussed current events at dinner. I asked if I could attend a weekend workshop on digital media. I stayed late at school without calling first. Each small defiance was met with escalating consequences. Privileges revoked, extra chores, silent treatments that could last days. My mother would whisper, "Just apologize. Just do what he wants. It is easier that way." But something in me could not do it anymore. The more I documented other people's lives through my camera lens, the more I realized how wrong my own situation was. Then came the email from Columbia University. They were hosting a summer journalism program for high school students. 2 weeks in New York City, learning from professional journalists, creating multimedia stories about urban issues. Mrs. Winters had nominated me based on my portfolio. "This could change your life," she told me, her eyes serious. "This is the kind of opportunity that opens doors." I knew immediately my parents would never allow it. 2 weeks away from home in New York City, with people they did not know or approve. It was impossible. But, for the first time in my life, I could not accept their inevitable no. This opportunity felt like everything I had been working toward. It felt like my future. So I made a decision that would ultimately lead to those 3 days in darkness. I decided not to tell them. I would find a way to go without their permission. It was the first time I had ever contemplated such direct disobedience, and despite my fear, it felt like finally being able to breathe. The Columbia University Summer Journalism Institute application required parental signatures, a fact that nearly stopped me before I started. But determination makes people resourceful. I scanned one of the many school permission slips my mother had signed in the past and carefully edited it in the school computer lab. For the program fee, I had been saving birthday and holiday money for years, hidden in a hollowed-out book I kept behind my dresser. My parents never gave me privacy, but they never expected deception either. When the acceptance letter arrived, it was the happiest moment of my life. I had been selected from hundreds of applicants nationwide. The letter praised my portfolio and mentioned how impressed they were with my unique perspective and technical skill. I read those words over and over during lunch period, Jasmine squealing beside me. "You have to go," she insisted. "This is huge, Audrey." "My parents will never let me," I said, though I had already decided I would find a way. Jasmine, always the practical one, helped me craft a plan. The program coincided with her family's annual trip to visit relatives in Michigan. We would tell my parents I had been invited to join their family vacation, something they had approved in the past. Her parents would drop me at the bus station instead of taking me to Michigan, and I would make my way to New York. It was not a perfect plan, but it was the only one we had. What we did not account for was the mail. The acceptance package arrived on a Saturday morning when my father was home. My mother always collected the mail, but she had stepped out to the grocery store. When I heard the mail slot click, I rushed to retrieve the thick envelope with the Columbia University logo, but my father was already there. "What is this?" he asked, turning the package over in his hands. I reached for it, trying to appear casual, but my heart was hammering so hard I felt dizzy. "Just some college information I requested," I said, the lie falling clumsily from my lips. He raised an eyebrow. "Then you will not mind if I open it." Before I could protest, he was tearing into the envelope. I stood frozen in our entryway, watching as he pulled out the welcome letter, the program schedule, the campus map, the housing assignment. His face darkened with each item he extracted. "Columbia University Summer Journalism Institute," he read aloud, his voice dangerously quiet. "Congratulations on your acceptance to this prestigious program." He looked up at me, and I had never seen such cold fury in his eyes. "When exactly were you planning to tell us about this?" I stammered something about just finding out, about wanting to discuss it with them properly. The lies piled up and tangled together as panic rose in my throat. "Do not lie to me," he said, cutting me off. "This letter says you applied months ago. It says you submitted a portfolio. It says you listed Mrs. Winters as a reference." He pulled out another paper. "And what is this digitally altered permission form with your mother's signature?" The forgery was the worst offense in his eyes. Worse than the secrecy. Worse than the planning to leave without permission. In his world, dishonesty was the ultimate betrayal. My mother returned from the store to find him pacing the living room, the contents of the package spread across the coffee table. I was sitting rigid on the edge of the sofa, tears streaming down my face. "What is going on?" she asked, setting down her grocery bags. My father thrust the acceptance letter at her. "Your daughter has been plotting behind our backs, forging signatures, planning to run away to New York City." "I was not running away," I protested. "It is a prestigious journalism program. Mrs. Winters nominated me. Only 30 students from the whole country got in." My mother's face paled as she scanned the letter. "Oh, Audrey," she whispered, "what were you thinking?" "I was thinking you would never let me go," I cried. "I was thinking this is my dream, and you never listen to what I want." "You are 17 years old," my father shouted. "You do not get to decide these things. We are your parents." "You are my jailers," I shouted back. Years of resentment erupting. Normal parents would be proud. Normal parents would help me pursue my dreams. His face contorted. "How dare you?" he hissed. "After everything we have done for you, the sacrifices we have made, the values we have tried to instill. And this is how you repay us, with lies and forgery and disrespect." My mother tried to intervene. "Richard, let us all calm down and discuss this rationally." But he was beyond reason. "She has been planning this for months, Linda. Months of deception right under our noses." He turned back to me. "Who helped you? Was it that Winters woman? Was it Jasmine?" I refused to implicate anyone else. "I did it on my own," I insisted. He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "More lies. You are incapable of telling the truth now, aren't you?" He grabbed my arm, pulling me up from the couch. "I have had enough of this." "Richard, what are you doing?" my mother asked, her voice rising in alarm. "What I should have done years ago when we first saw signs of this defiance. She needs to understand there are consequences for her actions." He began dragging me toward the basement door. I struggled against his grip, but years of factory work had made him strong. "Mom," I pleaded, "do something." My mother stood frozen, conflict evident on her face. "Richard, maybe we should just take away her phone," ground her. "That hasn't worked," he snapped. "She needs time to think about her choices, to appreciate what she has before it's taken away. He pulled me down the basement stairs, my protests echoing off the concrete walls. Our basement was unfinished, used mainly for storage, and my father's workbench. It was always cold. The only light coming from a single bulb at the bottom of the stairs and a small window well that let in minimal daylight. "You want independence," he said, finally releasing my arm. "Let us see how you do on your own for a while." "You cannot leave me down here," I cried, rubbing my arm where his fingers had dug in. 3 days, he said. 3 days in the dark to fix your attitude. No phone, no computer. Time to think about the path you are on and where it leads. I lunged for the stairs, but he was already backing up, closing the door. "Dad, please," I begged. "This is crazy." The last thing I saw was my mother's face behind his shoulder, her eyes wide with distress but her mouth silent. Then the door slammed shut, and I heard the deadbolt slide into place. Footsteps retreated. I was alone in the semi-darkness, the reality of what had just happened too shocking to fully comprehend. The basement air hit me immediately, a damp chill that seeped through my thin t-shirt. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at the locked door, my mind unable to process what had just happened. Parents did not lock their children in basements. That was something from horror movies or news stories about terrible abuse. Not something that happened in clean suburban homes with trimmed lawns and mothers who worked at libraries. "He will come back," I whispered to myself. "He is just trying to scare me." I climbed the stairs and pounded on the door. "I get it," I called out. "You made your point. I am sorry." The words felt bitter in my mouth, an apology I did not mean for something that was not wrong. But I would have said anything in that moment to escape the basement. No response came. I pressed my ear against the wood and could hear muffled voices upstairs. My mother's higher pitch occasionally rising above my father's deeper tone, but I could not make out words. I pounded again harder, this time my fists beginning to hurt. "This is not funny. Let me out." Still nothing. I turned to survey my prison. The basement stretched about 30 feet in each direction, a large open space with concrete floors and cinder block walls. My father's workbench stood against one wall, his tools hanging in perfect order above it. Boxes of Christmas decorations and old clothes were stacked in one corner. The ancient water heater and furnace hummed against another wall. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling at the bottom of the stairs. I flipped the light switch, flooding the space with harsh light, and began searching for another way out. The only window was a small rectangular opening near the ceiling, a window well that looked out at ground level. It was designed for ventilation, not escape, maybe 12 inches high and 18 inches wide. Even if I could reach it by stacking boxes, I was not sure I could fit through it. There was another door that led to the backyard, but I already knew it was padlocked from the outside. My father had installed that lock years ago, after a series of break-ins in the neighborhood. Now it would keep me in just as effectively as it had kept intruders out. My phone. I reached for my pocket before remembering with a sinking feeling that my father had taken it from me earlier that week as punishment for coming home 15 minutes late from school. I had been using the computer lab to finish editing photos for the newspaper, lost track of time, and earned myself a 3-day phone restriction. I sat on the bottom step, hugging my knees to my chest. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a growing fear. What if he really meant to leave me down here for 3 days? No food. No bathroom except the old utility sink in the corner. No bed. Hours passed. The light from the window well began to fade as evening approached. I had been in the basement since early afternoon. My stomach growled, reminding me I had not eaten since breakfast. The house above me was quiet now. Had they gone somewhere, left me completely alone. I returned to the door and tried a different approach. "Mom," I called, softening my voice. "Mom, please, I need to use the bathroom. I am hungry." I knew she was the weaker link, the one who might break under guilt. More silence. The basement was growing darker as night fell. I hit the light switch again, grateful, at least for illumination. But as I moved toward my father's workbench, wondering if there was anything there I could use, the light suddenly went out, plunging me into near total darkness. "No," I gasped, running back to the switch and flipping it repeatedly. Nothing happened. He had cut the power to the basement. Only the faintest moonlight filtered through the window, well now leaving me in shadows. I fumbled my way back to the stairs and sat down, panic rising in my chest. The darkness felt physical, pressing against me from all sides. I had never been afraid of the dark before, but this was different. This was isolation, abandonment, betrayal by the people who were supposed to protect me. My eyes gradually adjusted enough to make out vague shapes. I decided to try to sleep to make time pass faster. The stairs were uncomfortable, but I curled up as best I could, using my arm as a pillow, shivering in the cool air. Sleep came in, fitful bursts interrupted by strange noises from the water heater, the discomfort of my position, and the gnawing emptiness in my stomach. When morning light finally began to filter through the window, well, I had a pounding headache from dehydration and hunger. I made my way to the utility sink and turned the tap. The pipes groaned, but water came out. I drank deeply, the metallic taste hardly registering through my thirst. At least they had not cut off the water. As the basement grew lighter, I began a more thorough exploration, looking for anything that might help me. My phone flashlight would have been invaluable, but without it, I had to wait for daylight to see properly. In a box of camping equipment, I found an old battery-powered lantern. When I clicked the switch, a weak, yellow light emerged. The batteries were nearly dead, but it was something. I also found an old notepad and pen in a drawer of my father's workbench. I began to write, partly to document what was happening in case I needed proof later, and partly to keep myself sane. I wrote about the events leading to my imprisonment, about my dreams for the future, about my growing understanding that what my parents were doing was not normal discipline but abuse. Hours crawled by. The small window provided enough light to track the passage of the sun. By my estimation, it was mid-afternoon of the first day when I heard footsteps above. The basement door opened, and my father's silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs. "Dad," I said, my voice hoarse, "please, let me out. This is not right." He descended halfway down the stairs and set a bottle of water on the step. "3 days," he repeated. 3 days in the dark will fix you." "Fix?" what I demanded, a flash of anger cutting through my fear. "Fix me wanting a future, wanting to be a journalist. What is broken about that?" "Your attitude, your defiance, your ingratitude." He started back up the stairs. "Where's Mom?" I called after him. "Does she know you are doing this?" He paused. "Your mother and I are united on this. You need to learn respect." Before I could respond, he was gone, the door locked behind him. I rushed up to retrieve the water bottle, rationing small sips, even though I wanted to drain it immediately. 1 bottle for how long he had not brought food. Night fell again, and I huddled on the floor with a dusty tarp I had found among the storage boxes. The temperature had dropped further, and I could not stop shivering. The hunger had moved beyond discomfort into a constant hollow ache. I dozed fitfully, waking often to the sounds of the house settling above me. On the morning of the second day, I heard my parents arguing upstairs. Their voices were muffled, but I could tell my mother was upset. Was she finally standing up to him? Would she let me out? I called up to her, but either she could not hear me, or she was choosing not to respond. I spent that day methodically going through every box and container in the basement, looking for anything useful. In a box of my grandfather's belongings, I found something unexpected, an old flip phone. My heart raced as I pressed the power button, but nothing happened. The battery was dead, and even if it were charged, it was so old, the service was probably disconnected. Still, it was the first real hope I had found. I pocketed the phone, continuing my search for anything that might help. In another box, I found some of my old school projects, paintings, and reports from elementary school that my mother had saved. The evidence of her care made my situation even more bewildering. How could she participate in this? By the third day, I was weak from hunger and sleep deprivation. The constant darkness when the sun set was affecting my mind. I found myself talking aloud just to hear a human voice. The lantern batteries had died, leaving me in complete darkness after sunset. I had finished all the water my father had left and my mouth was parched again. I lay on the basement floor, staring up at the ceiling, wondering if they really intended to release me at the end of 3 days, or if that had been a lie. What would happen when I returned to school? Would anyone notice the change in me? Would I tell someone what had happened? That was when I remembered something crucial. In the box with my grandfather's phone, I had seen a charging cable. It was an old mini USB type, but the utility sink had an outlet above it for my father's power tools. With trembling hands, I retrieved the cable and phone, plugged it in, and waited. After about 20 minutes, the screen flickered to life. 1 bar of battery, no service signal, but there was enough power to turn on the flashlight function. The weak light felt like a miracle after so much darkness. I scrolled through the phone's functions, looking for anything useful. There were old contacts, photos of my grandparents I had never seen, and something unexpected, the phone still had texting capability. Even without service, many phones can still send texts over Wi-Fi. Did our home Wi-Fi reach the basement? I had never tried to use it down here before. I navigated to the network settings and nearly cried when I saw our home network appear. The signal was weak, but it was there. And my father, for all his controlling tendencies, had never changed the Wi-Fi password from the default printed on the router. With shaking fingers, I composed a text to Jasmine. In basement. Parents locked me in 3 days. No food. Help. I pressed send and watched the little circle spin. Would it go through on this ancient phone? Would Jasmine even see it? It was my only chance. The message marked as delivered, but there was no way to know if she had received it. All I could do was wait and hope that someone would realize something was very wrong in our perfect suburban home. The waiting was excruciating. I stared at the phone screen until the battery warning flashed, then reluctantly unplugged it to save the remaining power. If Jasmine had received my message, what would she do? Would she believe it? It sounded crazy even to me, and I was living it. I tried to imagine the scenario from her perspective. Her best friend suddenly sends a bizarre text claiming to be imprisoned in her own home. It would be easy to dismiss it as a prank or a mistake. But Jasmine knew me. She knew I would never joke about something like this, and she had seen the growing tension with my parents over the years. Hours passed with no response. The phone battery dwindled to a critical level, and I reluctantly turned it off completely to preserve what little charge remained. Without its light, the basement returned to shadows, with only the fading afternoon light from the window well illuminating my prison. As evening approached on that third day, I heard unusual activity upstairs. Multiple voices, including ones I did not recognize. My heart leaped. Had someone come? Was help finally arriving? I rushed to the bottom of the stairs and called out as loudly as my weakened state would allow. I am down here, help in the basement. The voices continued, but no one came to the door. Either they could not hear me, or something was preventing them from investigating. I pounded on the door, but the heavy wood muffled the sound. After about 15 minutes, the voices faded. A car started outside. They were leaving. Whoever had come to the house was gone, and I was still locked in the basement. Despair washed over me like a physical wave. I slid down against the wall, too exhausted and hungry to even cry properly. Had my parents managed to convince whoever came that everything was normal? What had they said about my absence? Later that evening, the basement door opened again. My father came halfway down the stairs, this time with another bottle of water and a small piece of bread. "Your friend Jasmine and her mother came by," he said, his voice eerily calm. "They were concerned when you did not respond to texts. We told them you were out with some new friends from the newspaper." I stared at him in disbelief. "And they believed that they just left." "Why wouldn't they believe us? We are your parents." He set down the water and bread. "The police also stopped by. Apparently your school counselor called them when you missed 2 days of class with no explanation." My breath caught. The police had been here. "What did you tell them?" I asked. "The truth," he said. "That you are going through a rebellious phase. That you have been spending time with new friends we haven't met yet. That teenagers often need space." "That is not the truth," I cried. "The truth is, you locked your own daughter in a basement for 3 days without food." 3 days of reflection, he corrected, as if this was a normal parenting technique. "Tomorrow morning you will come upstairs. If you have learned your lesson, we can begin to rebuild trust. If not," he let the threat hang in the air. "They will come back," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Jasmine knows something is wrong." A flicker of concern crossed his face, quickly replaced by certainty. "No one questions how parents raise their children in this house," he said. "Remember that." After he left, I devoured the small piece of bread, trying to make it last as long as possible. The water I again rationed, knowing it needed to sustain me until morning at least. I turned the phone back on, briefly risking the remaining battery. There was a response from Jasmine. "OMG, are you serious? Mom and I came by. Your mom said you were out. Are you really in the basement?" I quickly typed back, "Yes. Dad says police came too. They all left. He's letting me out TMRW morning. Don't trust what they say." The phone died just as I pressed send. I had no way of knowing if the message went through or what Jasmine might do with the information. All I could do was wait for morning and whatever came next. Sleep was impossible that night. I was too hungry, too anxious about what would happen when my punishment officially ended. Would things go back to normal as if this had never happened? Would they expect me to go to school, to sit through classes and pretend I hadn't been starved and locked away? What would I tell people if they asked where I had been? Most importantly, would this happen again the next time I defied them? Dawn came with agonizing slowness. I sat on the bottom step waiting, listening for movement upstairs. Eventually, I heard footsteps, the coffee maker beeping cabinet doors, opening and closing. Normal morning sounds that now seemed surreal after what I had endured. Finally, the basement door opened. My father stood at the top of the stairs. "Come up," he said simply. I climbed the stairs, on shaky legs, emerging into the kitchen that looked exactly as it always had. My mother stood by the sink, not quite meeting my eyes. "Go shower and change," my father instructed. "Then breakfast. We need to talk about your return to school tomorrow." I stared at them both, these strangers who were my parents. You locked me in the basement for 3 days, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You told everyone I was out with friends. You lied to the police. We did what was necessary, my father replied. Sometimes strict measures are needed to correct a dangerous path. My mother finally spoke. Audrey, we love you. Everything we do is because we want what is best for you. The normality they were trying to project was more terrifying than anger would have been. They truly believed they had done nothing wrong. I am going to shower, I said, unable to process anything more in that moment. I needed to be alone to think, to plan my next move. As I made my way upstairs to the bathroom, I heard the doorbell ring. Through the upstairs window, I saw a police car parked out front. My heart raced. Had Jasmine's final message gone through? Had she called them again? I heard my father's voice downstairs, confident and reasonable. Officers, what can I help you with today? I believe we spoke yesterday. A different voice responded, one I didn't recognize. Sir, we need to speak with your daughter, Audrey. Is she home now? She just returned a short while ago, my father said smoothly. She's been out with friends from school. Teenagers, you know, not always great at keeping their parents informed. We'd like to see her, please. I crept to the top of the stairs, listening intently. This was my chance. From my position at the top of the stairs, I could see 2 police officers standing in our entryway. One male, one female, both with serious expressions that suggested this was more than a routine follow-up. My father stood with his back to me, shoulders squared, in the confident posture he always adopted when dealing with authority figures. My mother hovered nervously to the side, her hands twisting the dish towel she was holding. Audrey, my father called without turning around, somehow sensing my presence. The police would like to speak with you. Come down, please. I descended the stairs slowly, acutely aware of my appearance, after 3 days in the basement. My clothes were dirty, my hair matted. I had lost weight, my face gaunt and pale. I looked exactly like what I was, someone who had been imprisoned. The female officer's eyes widened slightly at the sight of me, but she quickly composed her features. Audrey, I'm Officer Martinez. This is Officer Reynolds. We'd like to ask you a few questions if that's okay. Before I could respond, my father interjected. Whatever questions you have can be asked with us present. She's a minor. Actually, Sir, Officer Reynolds said firmly, in situations like this, we prefer to speak with the minor separately first, standard procedure. Situations like what my father demanded. My daughter was out with friends without permission and is now being disciplined by her parents. This is a family matter. Officer Martinez looked at me directly. Audrey, is that what happened? Were you out with friends? This was the moment. The crossroads. I could feel my father's stare burning into me, silently commanding me to maintain the family fiction. My mother's fearful eyes begged the same. For 17 years I had obeyed them, kept their secrets, accepted their version of reality. No, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I was locked in the basement for 3 days, without food. My father's face darkened. She's being dramatic. We restricted her to the basement as punishment for planning to run away to New York without our knowledge. She had access to water and bathroom facilities. It was 3 days of reflection, not imprisonment. That's not true, I countered, finding strength in finally speaking the truth. He cut the power. He gave me 1 bottle of water per day and no food until last night. The basement door locks from the outside. The officers exchanged glances. Sir, ma'am, Officer Reynolds said, we need to investigate these allegations. Is there a basement entrance we can see? This is ridiculous, my father sputtered. You can't just come into our home based on a teenager's exaggerations. Actually, Officer Martinez said, pulling out her phone, We received some concerning evidence that gives us probable cause. She turned the phone toward my parents, and I caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a video playing. My father's face went slack with shock. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice suddenly less confident. "It was submitted to us this morning by Jasmine Taylor, and her mother, Officer Reynolds," explained. Apparently, Audrey had set up a security camera in her bedroom some time ago for a school project. The footage automatically uploaded to cloud storage. It shows you forcibly taking Audrey to the basement 3 days ago, along with audio of the threats made. The camera. I had completely forgotten about it. Months earlier, I had indeed set up a small camera for a photojournalism project on a day in the life of a teenager. The assignment had ended, but I had never taken the camera down. It was so small, hidden among books on my shelf, that my parents had never noticed it, and I had set it to automatically back up to my cloud account. Jasmine must have remembered. She had access to my cloud storage because we had worked on school projects together. When my text reached her, she would have checked the footage. My mother sank onto the bottom stair, her face ashen. "Richard, what have we done?" she whispered. My father's confident facade crumbled. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. "You don't understand," he said to the officers. "We were trying to protect her. She was planning to run away to New York City. Do you know what happens to teenage girls in New York?" Sir Officer Reynolds said firmly, "We need to see the basement now." Reluctantly, my father led them to the basement door. Officer Martinez stayed close to me, her presence protective. "The deadbolt is on the outside," Officer Reynolds noted, examining the door. "And there appears to be a new padlock as well." For security, my father insisted weakly. "The basement door leads to the backyard. We had break-ins in the neighborhood a few years ago." Officer Reynolds unlocked both locks and opened the door, revealing the dark staircase. "Power switch doesn't work," he noted, flicking it uselessly. "Circuit breaker issue," my father said. "Let's go down and take a look," Officer Reynolds suggested, taking out his flashlight. We all descended into the basement, the officers' flashlights illuminating the space that had been my prison. The tarp I had used as a blanket lay on the floor. The empty water bottles were collected in one corner. My father's workbench stood against the wall, my desperate notes still lying on its surface. "Is this where you were kept?" Officer Martinez asked me gently. I nodded, unable to speak, as the reality of the past 3 days crashed over me again. "And you had no food for the entire time?" "Just a piece of bread last night," I confirmed. "And 1 water bottle per day." Officer Reynolds was examining the window. "Well, the utilities sink the door to the backyard with its external padlock. Not exactly humane conditions," he noted grimly. "We need to ask you both to come down to the station," Officer Martinez told my parents. "We have some serious matters to discuss." "You're arresting us," my mother asked her, voice breaking. "For disciplining our child." "This goes beyond discipline, ma'am," Officer Reynolds said. "Based on what we've seen and the video evidence there are potential charges of child endangerment, false imprisonment, and child abuse." My father's face had gone from confident to fearful to a mask of cold anger. He turned to me. "You did this," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "After everything we've done for you." Officer Martinez stepped between us. "Sir, I'm going to ask you not to address your daughter that way. Please go upstairs and collect some identification. You'll be coming with us to the station." As they led my parents upstairs, I remained in the basement for a moment, looking around at the space that had held me captive. 3 days had changed everything. 3 days had revealed the truth about my family that I had always sensed but never fully acknowledged. 3 days had set me free in more ways than one. When I climbed the stairs and emerged into the light of our kitchen, Jasmine and her mother were standing in the doorway. The officers had let them in. Jasmine ran to me, wrapping me in a fierce hug that nearly knocked me over in my weakened state. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "When your mom said you were out with friends, I knew it was a lie. You would have told me." Her mother approached more cautiously, her eyes taking in my condition with growing horror. "Oh, Audrey," she said, "if we had known—" "You couldn't have," I assured her. "They were always so careful to seem normal to everyone else." As my parents were escorted to the police car outside, neighbors began to gather on lawns and porches, watching the unthinkable unfold in our perfect suburban street. The family with the immaculate lawn, and the father who organized the neighborhood watch, and the mother who volunteered at the library book sale being taken away in a police car, while their daughter stood in the doorway, visibly unwashed and malnourished. The secret was out. The carefully maintained facade had crumbled, and somewhere beneath my exhaustion and hunger and trauma, I felt the first faint stirring of something unexpected relief. The next hours passed in a blur of activity and emotion. Officer Martinez suggested I be examined at the hospital, and I did not resist. 3 days without food had left me dehydrated and weak, my body starting to consume itself for energy. The police called an ambulance, which arrived with lights flashing but no siren, a small mercy that prevented even more neighborhood attention. As the paramedics helped me onto a stretcher, I caught glimpses of neighbors watching from behind curtains or standing in small clusters on the sidewalk. Mrs. Abernathy from across the street had her hand pressed to her mouth in shock. Mr. Wilson, who had always praised my father as a man who runs a tight ship, stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head in disbelief. The secret was out. The perfect family revealed as a prison. In the ambulance, a kind-faced paramedic named Tony inserted an IV into my arm. "This will help with the dehydration," he explained, his voice gentle, as if speaking to a much younger child. "Just try to relax. You are safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign, almost meaningless after what had happened. Could I ever feel safe again? Would I always be waiting for the basement door to lock behind me? Jasmine had insisted on riding in the ambulance with me, holding my hand the entire journey. Her mother followed in their car. Officer Martinez also accompanied us, explaining that she would need to take a formal statement once I was stabilized. "You did the right thing," Jasmine kept saying. "I cannot believe they did this to you. I always knew your dad was strict, but this—" She trailed off, unable to find words for the magnitude of the betrayal. At the hospital, I was wheeled into the emergency department and transferred to a curtained bay. Doctors and nurses moved efficiently around me, checking vital signs, drawing blood, asking questions about my physical condition. A social worker named Megan arrived, introducing herself with a warm smile that did not quite mask the concern in her eyes. "Audrey, I am here to help coordinate your care and make sure you have somewhere safe to go after discharge," she explained. "Can you tell me if there are any relatives nearby who might be able to take you in temporarily?" I shook my head. My father had systematically isolated our family from relatives, claiming they were bad influences or did not share our values. My mother's parents were both deceased, and her sister lived in California, someone I had met only twice in my life. My father's family was a mystery. He rarely spoke of them. "That is okay," Megan assured me. "We have options. Foster care is a possibility, but given your age and circumstances, we may be able to arrange an emergency placement with a friend's family if they are willing." Jasmine, who had been listening nearby, immediately spoke up. "She can stay with us, right, Mom?" She looked at her mother, who had just entered the curtained area. Mrs. Taylor nodded without hesitation. Of course. We have the guest room, and Audrey is already like family to us. A small, fragile bubble of hope expanded in my chest. The Taylors' home had always been my refuge, the place where I had glimpsed what normal family life could be like. The thought of staying there even temporarily felt like the first good thing to happen in a very long time. Dr. Chen, the emergency physician, explained that they wanted to keep me overnight for observation and to continue IV fluids. Your electrolytes are imbalanced from the dehydration and lack of food, she explained. We need to correct that, slowly, to avoid complications. As I was being prepared for admission, Officer Martinez returned to take my statement. With Megan, the social worker, present, I recounted everything: the acceptance to the journalism program I planned to attend without permission, my father discovering the letter, the confrontation, the 3 days in the basement. I described the darkness, the hunger, the fear, my grandfather's phone, the desperate text to Jasmine. Speaking the events aloud made them more real, but also somewhat distant, as if I was telling someone else's story. The video from your room camera is strong evidence, Officer Martinez assured me, but your testimony is crucial. Your parents are currently being questioned at the station. Based on the evidence, they will likely be charged with several offenses. Will they go to jail? I asked, uncertain how I felt about the answer. That will be up to the courts, she said carefully. But cases like this are taken very seriously. Child abuse and false imprisonment carry significant penalties. Child abuse. The term hung in the air, heavy with implications. Had I been abused all along? Were the strict rules, the random inspections, the excessive punishments for minor infractions, had all of it been abuse? The realization settled over me like a thick fog. What I had thought was strict parenting had crossed a line long ago. It took the extreme of the basement to make the pattern clear. As evening fell, I was moved to a regular hospital room. Jasmine reluctantly left when visiting hours ended, promising to return first thing in the morning. Mrs. Taylor hugged me gently, mindful of the IV line. We will have everything ready for you at our house, she assured me. Whatever you need. Alone in the hospital room with its antiseptic smell and rhythmic beeping machines, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not the panicked tears of the basement, or the shocked tears of the rescue, but deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from the very core of my being. I cried for the child I had been always walking on eggshells, always trying to be perfect. I cried for the years of believing that my parents' control was normal, was love. I cried for the loss of the family I had thought I had imperfect but still mine. A night nurse named Gloria heard my crying and came in, sitting quietly beside my bed. She did not offer platitudes or tell me everything would be okay. She simply handed me tissues and sat with me until the storm passed. Sometimes, she said, finally, the hardest part of healing is accepting that you did not deserve what happened to you. Her words lodged in my heart like a seed, something I would return to many times in the coming months. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Doctors rounded, pronouncing me stable enough for discharge. Megan returned with paperwork for temporary emergency placement with the Taylors. A detective from the Special Victims Unit came to ask follow-up questions and inform me that both my parents had been charged and were being held pending bail hearings. Your mother is claiming she was also afraid of your father, the detective told me, that she wanted to help you but was too frightened of the consequences. I thought of her silent presence behind my father as the basement door closed, her failure to intervene over 3 long days. She could have called someone. I said, my voice flat. She could have unlocked the door when he wasn't home. She chose not to. By early afternoon, I was wheeled out of the hospital to Mrs. Taylor's waiting car. Jasmine had brought me clean clothes from her own closet, slightly too big, but infinitely better than the dirty ones I had been wearing for days. The hospital had allowed me to shower, and a kind volunteer had helped wash and comb my tangled hair. As we drove to the tailor's home, I stared out the window at the familiar streets of our town, everything looking simultaneously the same and completely different. How strange that the world had continued normally while mine had imploded. People walked dogs, checked mail, washed cars, ordinary activities that suddenly seemed precious in their normality. The Taylor house was a modest two-story colonial with cheerful yellow shutters and flower boxes in the windows. It was not as large or as perfectly maintained as my parents' house, but it radiated warmth in a way our sterile home never had. Walking through the front door felt like stepping into a different world. Mrs. Taylor showed me to the guest room which had been hastily prepared for my arrival. Fresh linens on the bed, a vase of daisies on the dresser, a basket with new toiletries. "I hope this will be comfortable," she said. "I know it is not home, but it is perfect," I assured her, unable to express how much better this was than the home I had left. That evening, as we sat around the Taylor dining table eating homemade lasagna, Mr. Taylor gently explained that the school had been notified of my situation and was prepared for my return whenever I felt ready. "No pressure," he emphasized. "Your health comes first. School will still be there when you are ready." The thought of returning to school, of facing classmates who would inevitably have heard rumors about what happened, was overwhelming. But I also craved the normalcy of classrooms, assignments, the school newspaper. "Maybe next week," I said tentatively. "I would like to at least email Mrs. Winters, let her know what happened." Mr. Taylor nodded. "We will get you a new phone tomorrow," he said, "and anything else you need." That night, in the unfamiliar but comfortable guest room bed, I lay awake listening to the normal sounds of the Taylor household settling for the night. Jasmine's music playing softly down the hall. Mr. Taylor watching the late news. The dishwasher humming in the kitchen. No footsteps monitoring my movements. No door being locked from the outside. Just the gentle hum of a household where people felt safe. Sleep did not come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the basement darkness. But when I finally did drift off, it was with the knowledge that when morning came, I would be free to open my door and walk out. It was a freedom I would never take for granted again. 6 months after those 3 days in the basement, I stood in front of the mirror in the Taylor's guest bathroom, which had become my bathroom in what was now my room. The face, looking back at me, was still recognizably mine, but different in subtle ways. My cheeks had filled out again after the starvation. My eyes looked clearer, more focused. But the biggest change was invisible, a shift in how I carried myself. The perpetual tension in my shoulders had eased. I no longer flinched at sudden movements or loud noises. I had stopped constantly scanning my surroundings for signs of danger. Living with the Taylors had shown me what family could and should be. They had rules, of course, reasonable ones, about curfews and chores and schoolwork. But there was also laughter around their dinner table. Disagreements happened without shouting or threats. Mistakes were treated as learning opportunities, not moral failings. Most importantly, love was expressed openly, not used as a weapon or a chain. The court case had moved more quickly than expected. My father had initially pleaded not guilty, maintaining that his actions were within his rights as a parent. But faced with the damning video evidence and my testimony, his attorney had eventually negotiated a plea deal. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison for child abuse and false imprisonment with mandatory counseling and parenting classes. He would be eligible for parole in 2 years. My mother's case had been more complicated. She claimed to be a victim of my father's controlling behavior herself, too afraid to intervene on my behalf. There was some truth to this, I had to admit. I had witnessed his control over her for years. But she had also been an active participant in my imprisonment, maintaining the lie to friends and police. In the end, she received a suspended sentence, 5 years of probation, mandatory therapy, and parenting classes. She was living with her sister in California, now sending me letters that I was not yet ready to read. The child welfare case had been resolved with relative ease given my age. At 17, nearly 18, the court had granted the Taylors temporary guardianship until my birthday, at which point I would legally be an adult. They had made it clear that their home remained mine for as long as I needed or wanted it, regardless of my legal status. My therapy sessions with Dr. Grayson had become the cornerstone of my recovery. Twice a week at first, now down to once weekly, these sessions helped me untangle the complex web of emotions around what had happened. Grief for the family I had lost, anger at the years of control disguised as care, fear that still sometimes gripped me in the night, and guilt unexpected and unwelcome for having caused my parents' downfall. "You did not cause this," Dr. Grayson reminded me repeatedly. "You were a child seeking independence in normal, healthy ways. Their response was abusive and criminal. That is on them, not you." Slowly, I was beginning to believe her. School had been both a challenge and a salvation. Returning 3 weeks after the incident, as people carefully called it, I had faced curious stares and whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. But I had also found unexpected support. Teachers who checked in quietly, offering extensions or quiet places to decompress if needed. Classmates who simply treated me normally, a gift I had not anticipated. And there was Mrs. Winters, my journalism teacher, who had pulled me aside my first day back and simply said, "Your camera work has always shown your ability to see truth. Now you have lived it. When you are ready, that perspective will make you an even more powerful storyteller." She had kept the photography editor position open for me, welcoming me back to the newspaper staff with no pressure but plenty of encouragement. And she had helped me reapply to the Columbia journalism program for the following summer, writing a recommendation letter that brought tears to my eyes when she let me read it. "Audrey has faced adversity that would break many adults," she wrote. "She has emerged with her compassion and commitment to truth, not just intact, but strengthened." Her photography already showed remarkable insight. Now, her life experience has added a depth of understanding that makes her work truly exceptional. The acceptance letter from Columbia arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in April. This time, when I opened it with shaking hands, Mrs. Taylor was beside me, her excitement matching my own. This time, there would be no need for deception. No forged signatures. No secret plans. The Taylors had already offered to drive me to New York themselves when the time came. But perhaps the most unexpected development in my recovery journey had been my decision to share my story publicly. It began as a personal essay for the school newspaper, carefully navigating privacy concerns while still speaking truth. The response had been overwhelming, with emails and messages from students who recognized elements of their own family dynamics in my story. Some were facing situations far worse than I had imagined. That essay led to an invitation to speak at a child welfare conference, which led to volunteer work with a local organization supporting teenagers in crisis. I began documenting stories of other young people who had survived family abuse, using my photography to capture their resilience rather than their victimhood. It became a project that gave purpose to my pain, transforming my experience into something that might help others. Not all days were good ones. I still had nightmares about the basement darkness, Certain smells, particularly the musty concrete scent of unfinished basements, could trigger panic attacks. And there were moments of devastating sadness for the family I had lost, or perhaps had never really had. But the bad days were becoming less frequent, the good days more common. On my 18th birthday, the Taylors threw me a small celebration. Jasmine, who would be my roommate at college in the fall, had decorated the dining room with photos spanning our friendship carefully, choosing ones that did not include my parents, Mrs. Taylor baked my favorite chocolate cake. Mr. Taylor presented me with a card containing a key to their house. "This will always be a home for you," he said simply, "no matter where life takes you." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at the desk in my room and opened my laptop. I had been working on a video project, compiling interviews with abuse survivors, interspersed with resources for those still trapped in dangerous homes. It was nearly complete, but I had been struggling with the conclusion, unsure how to end on a note of hope without minimizing the real pain these stories contained. Looking at the footage, at the faces of people who had endured and survived, I finally understood what needed to be said. I recorded my final narration, speaking directly to the camera. 3 days in darkness taught me something I will never forget. We are stronger than we know. The people who should protect us sometimes cause the deepest harm, but that harm does not define us. What defines us is what we choose to do with our pain, how we rebuild, how we reach back to help others still trapped in their own darkness. If you are watching this from a place of safety, consider yourself fortunate. But if you are watching from your own version of a basement, know this: there is light waiting. There are people who will believe you. Your voice matters. Your freedom matters. You matter. The project would go live the next day, part of my ongoing commitment to turning my experience into a resource for others. It would not reach everyone who needed it, but it might reach someone. And for now, that was enough. As I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, I thought about the journey from that basement to this moment. The path had not been straight or easy. There were still obstacles ahead, relationships to rebuild or release trauma, to process a future to create distinct from my past. But for the first time since those basement doors had locked behind me, I felt truly free, not just physically, but in my spirit. Free to choose my own path, free to define family on my own terms, free to tell my truth. I had survived 3 days in darkness, but more importantly, I had emerged into a light of my own making, and I would never let anyone lock that door again. If my story has touched you in any way, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel. Your support helps these stories reach others who might need to hear them. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal by someone you trusted? Share your experience in the comments below, but only if you feel comfortable doing so. Sometimes sharing our stories is the first step in healing. Thank you for listening. And remember, no matter what darkness you have faced, you deserve to step into the light.